Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Just a disclaimer, Bill and I had a little confusion around the title. It's my sprint into wine, but I like spirit better, so let's go with that. Okay, how many of you guys collectively in the room have fallen in love with a new hobby? I'm talking about that feeling that you get when you learn something new and you go deep down the rabbit hole. Can I see a show of hands? I was going to be shocked if it wasn't everybody, so it's the majority. Well, over the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you about my sprint or spirit into wine and how I went from 0 to 60 in my wine education journey over the last 2 years. So, as everybody can see here, before 2023, I knew two things about wine. First and foremost, I knew pretty much what everybody in this room already knows. There are two types of wine. You have red wine and white wine. Generally speaking, there's some exceptions, obviously. The second thing that I knew about wine were the different varietals. Although I didn't know what that word meant at the time, it's just a fancy word for types of wine. So Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, etc. And that was the extent of my wine knowledge. When I would go to dinners, to steakhouses, I would just simply copy my neighbor and order whatever they got. So if my neighbor got a Napa Cab from Hull in California, that's what I would get, just to make sure people thought I knew what I was talking about. So that was the extent of my wine education. However, I would be remiss if I didn't mention sorry, I guess I got disconnected from the Zoom session. Anyway, we'll go without the slides, even though they're really helpful. So I don't know if you're familiar with the song Marvin Gaye and Chardonnay by the artist Big Sean. Very few people probably are. But in 2007, Big Sean came out with a song called Marvin Gaye and Chardonnay. I was familiar with the term Chardonnay from that song, and that was kind of the extra part of what I knew about wine. So in January of 2023, I accepted a job with a family office here in town that invested across a variety of different companies and asset classes. A lot of those companies were in industries that everybody's heard of, and there was one company that operated in the wine sector. It was a winery in Oregon's Willamette Valley, which is essentially like Oregon's Napa Valley. It's their most famous wine-producing region. When I accepted this job, I knew that I would be executing a private equity strategy on behalf of the family office. However, I had no idea that I would be operating within the confines of a winery, let alone looking at investing in other wine-adjacent companies. So roughly about 1 month into my journey at my new job, I was on a plane from DFW to Oregon, tasked with going to this winery and essentially being the interim general manager and CFO. And keep in mind, this is still early into my wine education. I had no idea how wine was produced. I didn't know the jargon, the complexities, etc. So here I am being thrust into an unknown situation. I was way outside of my comfort zone, very uncomfortable, but there was something interesting about wine that allowed me to dig in a little bit over the ensuing 18 months. So a couple of months into my new job, I started to learn more about wine because I was putting in these situations where I was around the table with people that knew a lot about wine and could explain all the different types of aromas and flavors that they taste in wine. I was intimidated and I wasn't going to let myself fail. So as a result, what I did was I did what I knew best, which was read up on the topic and get as smart as I can about wine in a short amount of time. This caused me to go essentially down the rabbit hole to the point where I signed up for the WSET certification, which if you guys are not familiar with the WSET platform or program, it's essentially geared towards sommeliers and restaurants as well as folks in the wine industry to get you up to speed in an educational setting. There's 4 parts, 4 levels of the program, and I signed up for level 1 in May of 2023, roughly a few months after I was thrust into this new realm. And it didn't stop there, because as I learned more about how wine was made, how a single grape that's grown in Oregon, the same grape that's grown in California and Burgundy, France, can all taste vastly different, I just started to pick up on it and incorporate that into my day-to-day life. So for instance, I read about what I could, varietals, wine producing regions, etc., and then put my learning into practice from a practical standpoint and spent a lot of time, probably more time than I should have, in Pogos and Total Wine here in town. And I wasn't looking to shell out a lot of money because I didn't want to go all the way down the rabbit hole from a dollar spend standpoint. So I'd buy the most inexpensive bottle that I could find based on the region that I just read about. So if you didn't know, you can find really good wine for sub $15 a bottle. I highly recommend it. Trader Joe's is actually a sleeper when it comes to quality wine at a discount. So there's plenty of options to choose from. Now, a few months later, we're in October 2023 at this point, I essentially am fully committed to wine. I've gone off the deep end, and I am talking about wine to all my friends, and I'm, pretty much a millennial, so none of my friends drink wine, so I am certainly the odd one in the group. However, when I'm around the dinner table with folks that are a little bit older, I seem to fit in a little bit better. So it certainly has paid off from that standpoint. So in October of 2023, I passed level 1 of the WSET program, signed up for level 2, and I basically had a knowledge base of wine, which was built up to the point where I could actually start exploring different wine regions. So in the spring of 2024, just this year, my wife and I took a trip to Switzerland and northern Italy. And we already had this trip planned. This is way before I really got into wine, but I made it an emphasis and a point for us to visit every single wine producing region that we could, given our timeline and our travel plans. So we went to Switzerland and visited the Valais wine region where they make Pinot Noir, which is fabulous. And then obviously went to Piemonte in northern Italy, just west of Milan, and had some amazing Barolo and Barbaresco. And even went to Cinque Terre down on the coast of Italy and had Vermentino, which is a very acidic white wine, and that was fabulous as well. My wife was a little frustrated with how much wine we were drinking and learning about on the trip, but I was having a blast. It was like all of my efforts thus far had been, solidified and have paid off, and I was able to actually have fun with what I have learned. So fast forward to where I'm at right now. I'm actually this Saturday taking level 3 of the WSET program, which takes about 2 months to pass. Knock on wood that I actually pass, because apparently you're supposed to do self-study for about 75 hours, and I have done about 2 hours so far, so I certainly have a lot of wood to chop from that standpoint. But I've actually joined an advanced wine tasting group here in Dallas, where basically everybody in our group brings 2 of their most interesting bottles every single month. We open it up, we talk about what we're tasting, and we just have a blast and drink with a lot of friends. And in the fall, my wife and I are actually planning on taking a trip down to Napa Valley, which I've never been to before, so I'm excited for that. And then in 2025, we have a trip planned to Croatia and Slovenia. Yes, they make wine in Croatia and Slovenia, and I'm really excited to taste that. But more importantly, I will be wearing my Luka jersey when I'm in Slovenia, just so I can earn brownie points with the local Slovenians. Hopefully, knock on wood, he's still playing for us at that time. I believe he will. Now, taking a step back, going back to January 2023, I had no idea that I would be this into wine and that it would become one of my most favorite hobbies. Over the course of the last 19 months, I've had the chance to meet some amazing people, make great friends, and see some amazing places. Thank you for your time.